Hi boys and girls, my name is Miss Laura. I am from Grace United Methodist Church, where I'm the Director of Family Ministry and Christian Education. I am so glad that you could join us this evening. And when I say us, I say me and Smokey. This here is Smokey. Say hi. How old are you now, Smokey? 3 months? No, I don't think you're quite 3 months. I think Smokey is about two and a bit months. So he's still a little baby. So he would like to join us for story time tonight also. We are going to be reading a book called Mr. Brave. I gave this to my son when he had to be very brave. Now there are certain times in life, boys and girls, that I know we have to be brave in certain situations. And now with the virus going around and some people getting sick, these are times that I'm sure you've had to be brave a few times. But know, boys and girls, that you can always ask questions. Always. There'll always be somebody to answer your questions. Be that your mum or dad or aunt, uncle, guardians, or myself or Pastor Jim or Pastor Helen. We are all here for you to answer any questions or concerns that you might have. But when I see Mr. Brave, I think of you boys and girls too, because I know that you are a lot like Mr. Brave. Okay, let's begin. Are you ready, Smokey? I need both my hands for this. Can we do this? All right, he might hop down. We'll see. All right, Mr. Brave. Mr. Brave is not as strong as Mr. Strong. He is not as tall as Mr. Tall. But that does not stop him being brave, as you will soon see. Now last Tuesday, Miss Bossy invited Mr. Brave to tea. And don't be late, she shouted over the phone. There he goes. It was a very stormy day, but Mr. Brave knew that little Miss Bossy's temper was worse than the storm. So he set off for little Miss Bossy's house, hurrying along as fast as he could, to be sure he was not late for tea. Along the way, he heard a cry for help. It was Mr. Messy. He had been blown into the river by the wind. Mr. Brave did not want to be late for little Miss Bossy, but being the brave fellow he was, Mr. Brave stopped to help Mr. Messy, and he jumped in and he rescued Mr. Messy. Wow, isn't he brave? Sopping wet, Mr. Brave hurried along the road. Suddenly he heard someone loudly sobbing. Who could it be? It was little Miss Somersault. She was balancing on a tightrope tied between two tall poles. That's not easy to say. Oh, Mr. Brave, I'm so lonely, she sobbed. Nobody will come up and play on my tightrope. They are too frightened of heights. You're so brave. Won't you come and join me? Mr. Brave looked up at little Miss Somersault. Then he thought about little Miss Bossy. But being the brave fellow he was, he took pity on little Miss Somersault and climbed onto the tightrope. It was a tall tightrope. They chit-chatted happily until Mr. Brave happened to look down. Little Miss Somersault, look! The rope was going to snap. We're going to fall, and it's such a long way to the bottom. Oh, calamity! Oh, help! He cried out in panic. Be brave, Mr. Brave, said little Miss Somersault. With no more fuss, she carried him safely back down to the ground. Oh, thank you, said Mr. Brave with a sigh of relief. Little Miss Somersault said goodbye, and Mr. Brave was on his own, shaking like a leaf. I don't deserve to be called Mr. Brave. I was scared stiff. Thank goodness nobody knows my secret. He said it to himself, but was somebody else listening? Let's see. Little Miss Trouble just happened to be passing by, and she saw everything. And what she had seen and heard had given her an idea, a very naughty idea. She grinned a mischievous grin. Hey, come here, everybody. Come and see this, she shouted at the top of her voice. Very quickly, a large crowd gathered. I have an announcement, said Little Miss Trouble. Do you know that Mr. Brave is not brave at all? No, it can't be true, said all the crowd at once. It is true, said Little Miss Trouble, and I'll prove it to you. Mr. Brave, she continued, I dare you to walk across that tightrope. Now that wasn't very nice, was it, boys and girls? Let's see what happened. Mr. Brave looked up at the tightrope, and all the crowd looked up at the tightrope. Then all the crowd looked at Mr. Brave. Mr. Brave suddenly remembered something. A very important something. Just look at the time, he cried. I'm going to be late for tea at Little Miss Boss's. Gotta run, he cried, and he ran as quickly as possible. Hooray! Cheered the crowd, and they clapped and they applauded Mr. Brave. Little Miss Trouble looked very puzzled. Why are you all cheering him? She cried. He ran away. He wasn't brave at all. Oh, yes, he was, they all shouted. Would you show up late for tea at Little Miss Boss's house? Little Miss Trouble thought for a moment. Gosh, he is brave after all, she said in awe. And that is it, boys and girls. That was Mr. Brave. Wasn't that a fun story? I love all the Mr. Men books. And I have to say, there's quite a lot of them. Can you see here? These are all the Mr. Men, and each Mr. Man has a book written about him. Now, Mr. Happy is just here. And Mr. Happy is my favourite. And I named my farm after him. We have Happyland Farm, because in the book, Mr. Happy, they go to Happyland. And I've saved that book for you for another day. So check back in next Wednesday, and I will see which book I have for you then. But tomorrow, don't forget to check in at 5 o'clock on Engage Children's Ministry Facebook page, and you will find us there doing a Bible story and a craft. You can always reach there through our website at graceumc.org. All right, boys and girls, I love you all so very much. I'm going to say goodbye now, and so is Smokey. Are you getting tired all this hopping around? Oh, look at those big feet. Bye-bye. Bye-bye, boys and girls. All right, everybody. I love each and every one of you, and I will see you tomorrow at 5 o'clock. Okay, cheers and good night.